their sites go to your arrangements.
My, no, my thing, no, I wrong with that.
I had to laugh at one of our younger engineers. Off lunch.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
So I think we are stuff down there. Hopefully we'll. Next
Okay, that just won't be.
point.
Yeah.
But you're just gonna be slider.
It's not. Yeah, I think maybe it's not one.
July is that.
Okay, wow. Okay, here we go. We're missing a Palmer.
It looks like the yum sauce. That's another sauce.
It is elements. Citrus singer.
I've been down and I just.
I almost brought my too.
No, because I told them that they put things in little microscopic print, so that they can slide, we go, we're not gonna say. We just pass it.
Part of the procuring process.
The light on too, but the problem is, I forgot my glasses, and they wrote me and I had. So that would not be against. It was just a big one. Yeah, I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
I'm such a here.
Ball,
I'll make sure.
It's good, actually. I would have certainly paid. And they wrote the books and like, you want, I want to be better. So the bank was the one that the question based on the answer. Yeah, I don't like. So then I can tell it's a question.
Yeah. That,
Okay.
that city, is still kind of, challenge. We use, they look at the same work weekend.
Yeah.
I could use the latest. I'm like, it's like, this we can't take it.
Yeah. Like if you're close by, then you can feel it's sounding. Yeah, they think it's all that works for these two. Yeah, this is not.
I got two. Yes. And then you also got
Mr. Big.
I've been using yeah, yourself. I'm like, Mr. Big.
Mr. Dad.
Sounds like they want.
Or you can just, I'll just ask Ned to hold it up and then I'll.
That's my wife.
It's lower than you.
As far as I know.
Okay. All right.
Must be riding small.
With citizen Paul.
Not riding his bike, yeah.
Oh, well, depends on which clock you look at.
Okay. I don't wear a watch anymore. So.
Okay. Let's start our meeting for our city council study session, Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. It's now 6:30 p.m. And it looks like we have a fairly light agenda tonight. So it's possible, I think last night we got out of here in 59 minutes. Tonight we might even break that record, and no pressure on Hans, but I think we'll all be looking to him for helping us to keep that pressure. Yeah, 32 slides. That gives you about one every 30 seconds, so we should be pretty good. So anyway, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff. And okay, city clerk, would you please share the roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Deputy Mayor Whitting,
Present.
Councilmember Dorr,
Present.
Councilmember Ferris,
Present.
Councilmember Castema,
Present.
Councilmember King,
Present.
Councilmember Palmer,
Present.
Mayor Johnson.
And present. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, city clerk. Tonight, council, we have a pretty light agenda, items 1A through 1C with some citizens' comments. With your approval, or I'd like to get a motion to maybe approve the agenda before us.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda before us. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, council. Up first, we have a follow-up from October 10th. Not quite sure what that means, but I guess someone's going to brief us on that.
I think that was just if there was anything that was not finished
Okay.
from last night, and you did a fantastic job. So that there's
So
nothing.
We'll move on to 1B then. Council, we have a utilities capital improvement plan that our city engineer Hans Hunger is going to share with us. And I did hear rumor that it's very riveting. And our city attorney assured me that this would be very quick. And so I think he's got some inside staff information here. So I'll look forward to that.
Well, I'm assuming that you guys won't let me go after a while because you want to hear more. There was some encouragement, some might say threats to move fairly fast through this. So I will be trying to present this at a high level. The information's there for you to digest and come back to me with questions and stuff, but I'm trying to give you some food for thought and some information about our capital projects. I really do appreciate the time to come up here and stuff, because it is a very complex topic there. And some of this, you knew was coming about, talking about the capacity of the engineering and our workload. So I'm trying to give you some metrics to kind of see that by, and then food for thought. We're not asking today for any decisions from you. It's more, is this the right information that you need to see? And are there other ways to see this information? Because we have a lot going on in the city just with the capital projects, and it's hard to keep track of them all and know where they're at and stuff.
And then Hans, if I could just interject for the good of the order as you kind of prepare for that, I just want to say I give credit where credit's due, and all staff does a great job. But since you're here and you're getting ready to present before us, and I appreciate the tone of how you're articulating your presentation before we get it. But I'm hearing from our customers, and they're really pleased with your customer service approach and the way that you communicate with them. So not only do you do a great job in articulating to us, but you're transferring that down to the customers, and I'm hearing that, and your name comes up a lot. So I just want to say thank you for that and appreciate the good work you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can remember when I first started, I've been here for now about 6 years. And Steve had a conversation with me just about the first 3 months that I was here, asking, how long do you think it's going to take you to really be able to, fully embrace the city engineer position and stuff? How long is that? Trying to be optimistic, I said, probably about 18 months. It's a big job. Well, here I am 6 years later, and I just still feel like I'm learning so much. The more you know, the more there is other things to know to really get your mind around. So it is a big job, but we've got great staff that are moving this along, and I do appreciate that.
Yeah, just let me interject a little bit here too. Every once in a while I hear some real negativity about our planning or permitting and so forth. And I think a lot of that is holdover from prehistoric times, if you will. And so one of the things I think we need to do is, as council members and as staff, is try and let folks know that things have changed and that things are better. And I'd really like to see a push on that to dispel some of the things, because when I hear these comments, they're usually years, somebody filed for a permit 10 years ago, but that negativity is still out there. So thank you.
It takes a long time to change that. So tonight, as I said, no, we're not really asking for any decisions here and stuff. Of course, a study session stuff, but I would like some feedback on how we're presenting the information on the projects and the analysis that we do, just to kind of keep us going in the right direction. So one of the things I think about when, you guys are having to pass capital budgets and there's a lot in there, is it's hard to know what we're passing. Are we meeting the need? What is that need? And so I put together some metrics. Some of these are coming from, the utility rate study, but also just some metrics to say, are we moving the needle in the right direction as we're passing these budgets? One of the things that really stood out to me, and I'll just point out to one of these, is sidewalks. When you're thinking about sidewalks, we have a lot of areas without sidewalks, but let's just focus on the collectors and the arterials, the main thoroughfares that people use. We have 100 miles of missing sidewalk right now. That's from the Public Works staff that do the asset inventory telling me that. That's not how many are damaged or anything, that's missing. So if you said, okay, we're going to do a mile a year, that's 100 years. And there's a lot of metrics to decide, how fast am I trying to close that gap? And it doesn't always need to be us. We're trying to get the development community to do sidewalks too, as they do improvements and stuff. So it's a partnership there. But that's one thing of what's the need out there, and then how much am I funding?
Mr. Mayor.
Please, yeah.
Hans, along that lines, it was interesting you brought that subject up, because in my mind, that is one of the most important to my constituents is sidewalks. So with the fact that you have 100 miles of missing sidewalks along our arterials and collectors, question I have is, how many miles are we doing every year? And when we put in $1 million, I mean, I know it's kind of roughly translated because there would be different engineering requirements, et cetera, for different roads. But how much can I get for $1 million?
Yep. I'll come down to that in just a few slides, because I'm going to go from the needs to now, what have we got programmed in that we're actually completing here?
Okay, thank you.
And so the maps that are the next 3 ones are ones you saw during the utility rate study, and they're really trying to give you a visual of the age of some of our infrastructure and the need. And I really do thank you for, doing the hard work on the utility rate study and passing that. I think it sets a good foundation for us to be able to meet these needs and get things replaced. As Steve said, it's 98 projects, $98 million. We're investing that, and we're trying to move that along right now. And these needs really come out of each utility does a comp plan update. Ideally, every 10 years, you're doing a comp plan just for that utility to assess your infrastructure, to know where you need to do improvements, not just because of aging, but also because you need more capacity in your system. So now we get down to, well, what do you got planned? What's programmed in the next 6 years? And to answer your question there, Councilmember Castema, sidewalks on average, 1 mile per year is what we're putting in. That's the combination of a specific sidewalk project like we're doing on 7th Avenue Southeast, to where we're putting in a sewer line and we're adding sidewalks into that project there, to where we're putting it in for other work that we got specifically to do some pedestrian improvements. And so, okay, 1 mile a year, but it would still take us 100 years to get all just on the arterials and collectors, not on the local streets and stuff. So that's, something to consider. It's like, are we funding those enough? What are other ways, if we don't always have to build them, what are other ways to get these things constructed there?
I have a question.
Yes.
Follow up on, since that is tonight, at least is my favorite subject. How does that compare with other areas? I mean, to tell you the truth, that doesn't sound like a mile a year sounds like a lot, but when you tell me I've got 100 years, I kind of do the math. I'm 64, okay, 20 miles, maybe 25 miles I'm going to see, hopefully more. But how does that compare with other jurisdictions similar to ours?
I would say, living in city of Tacoma, I see a lot of areas without sidewalks on there. I'm not privy always to know, is this a collector or is this a local road, where the sidewalk is, but there's a lot of areas in there. Every time we annex an area, we should be considering what is the condition of the infrastructure there and how much is it going to cost to put that infrastructure in. It's something to consider to get down to the details.
Good point on the annexation. I would agree. Thank you.
And then there's some other, the utility projects, I've kind of taken a stab at like thinking about the age, how long does something have a service life for, like the pipes and the pumps and stuff like that. And that gives you a guidance on how often am I going to have to replace that? Our latest pipes that we use with the ductile iron or the polyethylene and stuff, it does have 100-year lifespan to it. But a lot of the stuff in the ground right now does not have that lifespan. So as we put new stuff in, we get a much longer lifespan out of it for when you can predict it. But if you had 100-year lifespan, you could reasonably predict probably about 1% a year is what I should be, replacing to just keep up with that. Now, you'll find most utilities, including ours, it's more than just the age. You've got to have some maintenance issues going on that have documented this pipe is reaching its end of its life cycle and get it in. But, we'll also take advantage if we're going to be tearing up that road and we know that that only has about 5 or 10 years left. Now's the time to do it. I wanted to point out this on the grants. Right now, these are just active grants that we have going on. And we have right now secured $19 million worth of grants, and these are all different funding sources. I will give a shout out to the grants coordinator position that was funded about 1.5 years by this. That position really works as trying to guide a good application in. How do we get successful? And I think since we've had that, we are much more polished. We're much more targeted on what grants we're going for. There's a lot of grants out there and you guys all hear about them, these federal grants and this and that. There is a lot of strings attached to, do you qualify for that? Is your project the one they're trying to fund? It takes time to ferret that out. But I just can't say enough that this is a high level of grants that we're getting right now. And this doesn't include the ARPA funds that we got for our city and stuff. This is just competitive grants where we've been out there trying to compete for this money. But it does also come with a level of, now you got the money, what are you going to do? It's kind of like a dog chasing a car. Okay, you caught it. What are you going to do with it and stuff? It's a lot of strings attached, a lot of administration with this stuff.
Just to put this in perspective, if you put this slide together 1 year ago or 2 years ago, what would be the amount of active grants? I'm assuming that it's increasing.
It has increased. Yes, we have increased the number of successful grants that we've been getting here and stuff. It's hard. You'd have to do it over time because you take like the Milwaukee Bridge, $9 million worth of grants for that and stuff, and that can skew the table there. But yes, we're much more successful now. And then one I wanted to point out, we shouldn't always have to fund these projects. A program that you guys adopted a while back with a code change was a change in our frontage improvement code. And this was specifically trying to address, what if I get somebody building a single family house out on one of these rural roads where even if they built the sidewalk, we don't even know exactly where to put it, or it's going to be forever till it's connected in. So we gave an option, a fee in lieu program. We've now gotten to the point where we've collected $63,000 in that are being going to specific projects that we're putting in to do non-motorized improvements. So I think that's a way of, it's not a huge amount, but at least it's trying to, help out us to achieve our goals. And so I think it's a really good program. It offers a very good relief valve. Before then, we were just saying they didn't have to do frontage improvements. We weren't getting anything.
Question.
Yes.
Has there ever been, to your knowledge, a program where, you have what are called business improvement districts, where a particular business district will designate itself, and then they'll put a special levy for that particular area for special purposes? Have you ever heard of any program where, neighbors on a street can actually encumber themselves if they want a sidewalk? In other words, they say, I want that. I'm willing to finance that. And I understand the complexities. I just wonder if you ever heard of anything like that. And then it goes on to their tax bill over, let's say, a 30-year time span to pay for sidewalks in that neighborhood.
Yes, although I haven't personally done one, local improvement districts is the mechanism you're talking about. It takes a vote of the people that are going to be taxed to say, yes, tax ourselves. You do all the engineering up front to figure out how much it's going to cost to put in these things, and then that's what they're paying over time.
And that could be done on a neighborhood basis.
Steve,
I think so.
Yeah, we've Puyallup has certainly done it years ago for downtown along Meridian. Much of the streetscapes in downtown were funded by an LID that was retired.
Before I came.
Okay, before. So I have seen it done when I worked for the city of Bellingham. It was done in a neighborhood area. The challenge is in neighborhoods, it's residential. And so the sidewalks are expensive. And so for individual residences to do it, I've never seen that done. I've seen it done in neighborhoods, but have commercial as part of the neighborhoods. That's where I've seen it done.
Understand. Thank you.
okay. And so I wanted to kind of give you an idea that we have 41 active projects right now that we're working on through the engineering department. Doesn't include all the smaller scale projects that, streets is doing on their own, or water or other, but it's 41 projects. And I put them out on a map here. And then I kind of give you a little more details of it. But it's a lot. It's a heavy workload to process these. And they're all different flavors of things. Some that we're doing annually, like the chip seal programs and stuff, but other ones, you get them brought to you on individual pieces in consent agenda for it, or you hear about them in a planning exercise of where we're trying to do this project. We are developing, as I'd had to develop, the maps for this. We worked with our GIS coordinator to say, can we take what we're putting into these maps and put them out on our, a public setting, so somebody could look at this and scroll in and click on a project and see what is that project, what's the person that's working on it in the city, what's the expected date of the project to be completed and stuff. And so we're working on that now, and I hope by the end of the year we'll have that out, not only for internal staff to see this and be able to click on it, because our development community has to be able to look at that as they're reviewing applications, our development review staff, but also for external people and yourself, that you'd be able to keep a little more tabs on where are we at on certain projects. So these are all the ones recently completed. And by recently, I mean since mid 2022. And here's the list of them on completed. So you can look at this later and stuff, but it is a wide variety. You might ask, why did I put Milwaukee Bridge on there? Wasn't that done like a long time ago? We are still working through the deobligation of the grants on that and all the administrative. We've gone through 2 audits. One with federal highway programs, one with WashDOT on that. It is a lot of work as you're administering these grants, and that falls primarily on the project managers. They know the projects, they know where the paperwork is, they have to supply all that, and you have to make sure you follow. One of the things that they pointed out on this, that when we advertised this project, we advertised state wage rates. We were supposed to advertise federal wage rates. So that was a ding on us. And all those little details are hard to keep track of, with that. So it does take a lot of expertise on the engineering part. And I really do praise them. So it continues on there. We do parks projects too, as you guys know, facilities projects. There's a wide variety of projects, 15 completed over that since mid 2022. And here is the 41 projects that we're actively working on. So it is a long list and they're spread out throughout the city. I had to do the map in 2 things, a north part and a south part for this. And hopefully you'll be able to see some of the projects you're familiar with in there. But it's a lot going on in these projects. They are ranging, from, 10 in scoping, 17 in design, 9 in construction, 5 other studies that we're doing. When you add up the numbers on the top, they don't add up quite right because projects often have multiple, things going on in it. You got a streets project that's replacing several utilities on it. You got a storm project that also is now morphed into a street project. So there's quite a bit of complexity with these. And so with that, I wanted to, this is kind of the first time you've seen it, and we talked about this in the utility rate study a lot. Yes. Oh. Oh, yes.
I wanted to ask about, where are we on that? I guess it's, the loop trail crossing on 15th.
Yep.
Where are we doing? Where on that one?
We're out to advertisement right now. So selecting getting contractor bids. It was going to open tomorrow. We have to issue an addendum after some questions came in, and it'll open 1 week later. So that'll be where we're opening the bid, and then you'll see a contract come before you in the November meeting there.
Good.
Yep.
Okay.
Quite complex project. You'd think a crossing would be fairly simple, but there's a lot of nuances in there. One, it's in a sag, and so you got to deal with a lot of drainage issues and making sure you're not causing puddling or causing a lot of maintenance issues for our street staff. But also, we just sat through a kind of a debriefing from some of the attorneys on our, a recent court case of what they're finding with, crossings. And, the one thing that really stood out to me on that is your highest liability is if you put a crossing in somewhere and you don't follow all the rules that are in there. The best case scenarios is you followed all the rules and then did some extra on top of that. They're very high liabilities for the cities.
Isn't that interesting that
Yes,
we do something and potentially create more liability than existing, keeping it as is?
it doesn't, it's not at first intuitive, but when you think about it,
But I get
you're
it.
creating expectations by a person walking across there. Painted lines. I'm in the right. I can walk across there.
Right.
The driver isn't necessarily going to stop.
Excellent. So that's good. So that's moving forward. Probably done next summer, maybe.
I'm hoping that, we'll be before that, because if we once we're out to construction and stuff, there isn't really a lot of lead time on the items for that. It's more of a can we get some dry periods to put that in?
And how are we doing on the 7th sidewalk?
That one is at about 90% right now. We just finished the last acquisition that we needed to do for that. But that was one of our senior engineer projects, Drew Young, who just left last week. So it's transitioned over to another engineer now. And we're working through, one little nuance is there is, do we have to go through the environmental permitting process for a sidewalk project? And we're looking at that to see, do we not qualify for the exemptions that you'd normally think it's just a sidewalk project? Is it real? But we got to follow our own rules that we would make a contractor go through for a private developer. So, that might delay it a little bit, but.
And are the neighborhood folks pretty supportive of this?
I think they're, I would say more than supportive. They're kind of
excited.
keep asking us when.
Good.
And so
good.
we've met with several of them and, some of the nuances of dealing with their irrigation systems and things. We want to be really good neighbors.
Good. Yeah, I talked to them 12 years ago about this.
Got to stop
that was a
talking
pipe
to
dream.
them until we're ready
That
for
was a pipe
construction.
dream at the time. That was a pipe dream, but it'll be nice to see this. It'll
Okay.
be good. It'll be really cool to see
Is
this.
there any other ones that
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. So we get a lot of complaints about speeding. Because people are going through the neighborhoods
Yep.
to get around the what do you call, choke points
Mhm.
in the traffic. So you have 19th Avenue Southwest. Is that a main thoroughfare?
No, it's a local street, but
Is it-
it's one of the areas where people are speeding. It's pretty straight road. And so they applied for the traffic calming program, which you have to actually have the data to support that. Yes, we actually have a problem out there. It did. Their 85th percentile is up in the 33, 35 range per miles per hour, much higher than the 25 that there. So we just had a public meeting with them 2 weeks ago to go over, here's the options before us. And we sent, right now, the ballots have been sent out because they vote on which option they would like. Somewhat, you might think, why do they have to vote on it and stuff? Sometimes people aren't too happy with the types of, the traffic calming devices we put out there. And so you want the neighborhood to be on board with it.
So you didn't get any, do you have any application? I handed out like about a half dozen traffic calming applications over by 7th Street Northwest. You didn't get it. You don't have anything from.
I'm not privy to that information. Jeff Wilson or probably Brian Roberts would know specifically there because
Sure.
the traffic engineers work in the Department of Permitting Services. Once they pass through the program and are ready to implement, that's when they turn them over to our group and stuff. But, you can inquire with them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now we get to the part where we're talking about like, okay, what's our capacity to manage 41 active projects here? This is our current staff that we have here. You've got me as a city engineer. You've got 4 project managers. One of them you approved for an addition last year. So thank you very much. We have a half one. That's our shared person that we share with Development Permitting Services. You got 2 capital inspectors, 1 contract specialist, and we're requesting to add 1 more of the contract specialists this year. So with that, we've also found, we're just continually behind. We're not able to process this many. And so we've tried some other techniques. We have 2 consultant engineers. You've approved $260,000 worth of that contract where they manage 4 of our projects for us. That's a consultant managing a design consultant to get us through to plans and specs so we can go out to bid. We also use some of our stormwater staff to assist with the projects. And so it becomes like, well, if you always see your projects being delayed, what is the appropriate number of staff to be able to process this amount of workload? And right now we're seeing it's not enough. So right now you have senior engineers that are currently manage 10 projects, and a journey manages about 7 projects. The associate, the beginner engineer is about 6, and our consultant engineers are managing 4 projects there with 2 inspectors, which usually gets them to about 2 to 4 projects active going on. And I will tell you, I really prefer that a inspector only have a maximum of 2 projects going on at any one time. He has to be the eyes and the owner's representative out there answering questions in a timely manner. So that has led to, in addition to the 41 active projects, 15 projects that are just kind of on hold. They're delayed because we don't have anybody to assign them to. And some of these can become very time sensitive. Shaw Road Phase 4A is a federally funded project that's scheduled to begin next year. We have to do a lot of promising when we get that money of when we're going to spend it and show that we're spending it on time, or we're going to be less liable to get the money in future years. So this is just a handful of these projects there. It changes over time as we manage these ones, but we're just finding we've got this backlog that we cannot get to.
What is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What is Shaw Road 4A exactly?
So this is from 23rd down to about 20th Street Place. So it's right before the first Deer Creek crossing underneath Shaw Road. This is the one that we applied for PSRC funding. We've got partial funding with this one
Okay,
for doing it. It's just for the design work there.
just the design work.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead. No, please go.
You had mentioned that you were short-staffed. What do you need for staffing to make this run more smoothly?
I'm going to get to that in just a second.
Perfect.
There. Just trying to work you through my math and show my work. a
All
little
right.
Mike, I'm going to wait because I think it's
Okay.
along the same lines.
Okay.
All right. So part of the question is like, well, how many projects is reasonable for a project manager to manage? And I will tell you right now, there is no industry standard for the number of projects that a project can manage because projects vary so much. So you're much more likely to say, how much time does individual projects take to manage from design to construction? We're what we call a cradle to grave. The project manager starts at the scoping and works it all the way through construction. I like that, and I think the employees like that too. You learn from your mistakes. If you miss something in the design and you have to deal with it during the construction, you learn that for the next design to improve. And they also has this good sense of ownership. But of all our projects that we completed, and I showed you this list before, this is the amount of hours. And we've been tracking our hours to the project since beginning of 2022. So you see some of these like Milwaukee Bridge, since that's only since 2022, that is only the hours the project manager had to spend during construction, not during design. There's a whole lot of hours that aren't accounted for there, but they vary quite a bit there. Here's for the parks projects and the amount of hours. And of course, a project varies by the project manager's experience level. Senior levels, you expect them to be much more experienced. They can work much more efficiently. People that are on the lower level, on the associate, they're learning this stuff and they'll get more efficient over time. So we rank projects into complexity and try to put an estimated hours that it will take. You know, anything from just 150 hours for a low complexity project all the way to 400 plus for their time for a high complexity project. And what affects the project's complexity? It's like, you know, well, how much are we trying to do with this project? How much is there very technical aspects like changing out a part or creating a new secondary clarifier at the treatment plant where you're digging down 20 some feet to if the grant sources, you know, these federal grants have a lot of requirements on there. Build Back Better America and things like that have requirements that you have to make sure you're aware of and you're fulfilling there. So you take those number of hours and you say, how much does an employee have available to work on them? And once you subtract out the holidays, vacation, sick, it's about 1,530 hours. So if you had a project manager taking on very high complex projects, that might be 4 projects that he could reasonably do. I asked the project managers about this and I got a range from 5 projects. If you wanted me to not be holding back projects, not delaying them, because I could get to everything, it would be 5 projects. And then some of the journey levels said, well, I could probably, you know, do 6, but they don't have as much experience on working on the more complex projects and stuff. And this is my experience telling me, we always underestimate how much time something takes. And then we find out as we're actually tracking it, it takes more time. So if you said 6 projects and you took our active plus delayed projects, total of 56, well, if you just split them among the different groups there, you'd need 4 senior engineers. We have 2 right now. You'd need 4 journey level engineers. We have 1.5 of those right now, and you need 2 associate engineers. And then inspectors, 8 to 10 construction projects per year. Really, that's about 3 inspectors trying to get that done. As much as we try to stagger the projects, there are so many other factors that affect how much you can stagger them and when a project goes.
Hey, Hans,
Yes.
I think I worked for a really short time as a project manager. And I think what might be helpful for citizens is to understand what these projects do. Like, first of all, you're going out for grants. You're looking for how they're going to fund them. If they're all funded, then you're looking at timelines, you're looking at budget, you're looking at other agencies that you have to communicate with, like with L&I. Plus, you're talking about actually doing the work. I mean, the paperwork or the coordination and all of that. I mean, if I missed anything, I think that might be helpful to say, why is it we need extra people? Because a project, you think, oh, well, it's just a project. You do it every day. You can just say, hey, we'd say Siemens Schmuckatelli, go out and do this. But it's not that.
It's not.
Everything's planned and coordinated. Plus, you're looking at finances, you're looking at, requirements, what you have to do for the contract, which is why the extra contract specialist is for. But all of that stuff is in coordination, and it kind of, and nothing ever flows the way you think it's going to flow. But you're doing a timeline, you're doing, I forget what those timelines are called, but
Gantt schedules. I like to equate things down to what people might encounter in their everyday life. Think about if you're doing a major remodel on your house. You might say, well, I've hired a designer. I mean, they'll take care of it all. But unless you have somebody that's a general contractor that's working on the coordinating schedules, trying to do things like work with the homeowner on how much is it going to cost? Do we have enough money? What do you want to make changes on? It's a lot. I did a major remodel on my house. I didn't have a general contractor. I felt constantly like I was being asked questions I didn't know the answer to, and I'm given the best answer I can, only to find out later that wasn't the very good answer and stuff. But it is a lot of steps, as you say. And if somebody has done that work on their house, they know how much work it is and all the different decisions you have to make.
So I'll ask my question now. In any of these projects, like in the permitting venue, the private sector or the client is contributing funds to that. And I've heard on that end where I've had some commercial developers say they would gladly pay more to have someone assist in the efficiency of their permit because it saves them money. Would that be the same in your case? Do you get any funds at all from private commercial entities? I look here, they're all grants, so they look like government and some that we fund. I'm just curious as far as that goes. And then the second part is this: have you ever done an analysis where, we experienced this with the public safety building? We waited and the price just kept going up with construction inflation being at annualized at one point at almost 10%. So have you ever done an analysis of, it's worth to hire these people because the net result is we will save money on these projects. We have the funds from the grants, et cetera, but we're sitting on these due to capacity, not due to actual funds. Does that make sense?
Yep. And we have done that. When I put in a project into our capital facilities plan, I have to know a lot of details of it. I have to know, what was the estimate that was done for putting in the dollar amounts? What year was that estimate created? And then I'm inflating that estimate to the estimated time that we're going to construct. If that estimate was created in 2021, but we're not constructing until 2025, I've got to use assumed or actual, if we've got them so far, inflation rates. And I can calculate this is how much more the project costs each year as we delay it. And you can cumulatively add up all there. It's not that difficult of there, but it is, it is real money. And that is something that I think gets lost. As you're saying, you don't know how much you're losing in your buying power when these things get delayed.
That gets to another question. And that is, I have heard people where I've kind of made this argument of just hiring people. The argument was, well, the workforce isn't there. It's very difficult. Do you find it's hard to hire an engineer?
I think right now it is. We're in one of the more difficult times to hire. The position that you guys approved last year's budget, a journey level, we started advertising the December after the budget session. And it wasn't until April that we've got some qualified applicants in there. So trying to attract, I mean, basically trying to attract somebody from someplace, some other group. The person we hired was from the Army Corps of Engineers. They wanted to work at Puyallup and local thing, but that's what we're up against. But that's where I want to like strategize. There's some projects there, it doesn't need an engineer to manage the project. I've had extremely good project managers that aren't engineers. It needs somebody that can critically think through processes and work out problems and keep on track on that. And I think one of the solutions, that we'll want to do is, as Steve and Ken Davies and I are trying to come up with a plan for this, who do we need and what we need is look at options like, can we have a project managing classification rather than just an engineering? And what number of projects could reasonably be done by that person?
Thank you.
So in looking at this, it's always good to compare with other cities. And as Steve mentioned, we did a small study looking at 10 of our comparable cities to say, how do we compare with their engineering staff that are just working on capital projects and stuff? We looked at it from both the manager level, the project manager or engineer level, the inspector level, and the contract support level. And we also tried to glean ideas because we did see a few of the jurisdictions that were using project manager, non-engineering staff for some of their more straight line utility replacement projects there. So this is a busy chart, but it's basically taking each, here's your 10 cities. Here's the number of staff. It's not comparing apples to apples all the time. Each city does things a little differently on how they're managing. Some break up their design and their construction staff into two separate groups. So one group does the design and they hand it off to another group to do the construction there. But on average, you're seeing between engineers and project managers about 8 there. Remember, we have 4.5 comparable cities. When you're looking at inspectors, typically they have 3 and sometimes augment. We do this. We augment with consultants or public works staff for our inspectors when there's just too many projects going on. But we have 2. They're averaging 3. When you're looking at the administrative, the contract support, the reason why I told Steve this is something we need right away this year is because we've added to our project management staff. That only adds more contracts that are going through. And our contract specialist does not just do work for engineering. They do work for the entire city, other departments that need contracts through and follow the process right. And I think I have one of my key advocates over here, our city attorney, he's referring people over to our contract specialist because she will get them through the right process to keep us from not just doing things wrong, but actually losing money by not doing things right. And so we're recommending, to have this at 2 positions. We have 1 right now. We add 1, that'll get us up to the 2. And then managers, right now you have 1 manager, myself, managing this group. The things that I think we're really, lacking on is the time to be able to do this planning on our capital. Where are the projects coming from? How to sequence them out there? You're missing that component. And also, frankly, at 41 projects, I have a hard time keeping oversight over 41 projects on guiding the engineers where they need to doing all that coordination stuff. It's feels stretched thin. It's not my highest priority to fill there. But I can feel that sometimes I think I'm a bottleneck for getting things, and analyzed enough. We really take a lot of pride in making sure we are coordinating. It's the collaboration that is one of our values. I'm very confident if you ask the public works folks, the parks folks, do we collaborate with them as we implement these projects? They would say, yes, we're very involved in this. Here's just a graph version of what you saw with the engineering at the top, the 2 blue lines on either end, that's Puyallup. And you can see where we fall compared to the other cities. When you look at the administrative staff, some people have more than 2 and stuff, or are you comparing the managers?
Hans,
Yes.
hate to pepper you with all these questions, but since
fine.
you're like the only person up tonight, I guess you drew the short straw. Have you applied the process of lean, Six Sigma, I know that we have about 20 green belts in the
Yep.
city. I'm not sure if there's anyone within your department, but going through the Kaizen process, et cetera, have you engaged in that?
We do. So like one of the ways that we came up with to streamline processes is having some on-call consultants for certain types of work that we have to do, rather than having to go through and, do an advertisements, interview, select consultants, and then throw them through the contract process for things like material testing, things like that. We found through streamlining and doing the lean process, it's much better to have an on-call process there. So we've used it in a lot of different ways. We did a pretty good exercise with the clerk's department to streamline how are we getting these contracts through the process and making sure we're getting all the required approvals that we need there in combination with the clerks. So I think that's another area where we really did try to make it efficient. We are a group that definitely embraces continual learning. There's always room for improvement. So this comes, down to the final, close to the final there of what I'm saying the gap is right now. And I realize that no city, none that I've talked to, is ever fully staffed. They never have enough bodies to do everything that's being asked. I'm not asking for that. I realize you're always going to feel stretched thin a little bit and stuff. But if I had to recommend the number of staff that we need to close this gap between what the workload we need to do and the staff to get it done, it is, another 5, engineers or project managers, some combination of that, another inspector, the 1 contract specialist that is already in this year's budget, and then 2 additional managers. But what I want to do, and I think Steve has alluded to this, is we want to develop a plan and put that plan together like, okay, if this is the gap, how long to fill this gap? And what is the sequence for doing that? And then bring that incrementally. But I think that's what I'm saying there. So I guess what I'm asking from you tonight is, am I bringing the right information to you? Or are there key things that I'm missing in evaluating what is the gap? And then how do we, present this in another way?
Yeah, I think it's the right information. When we passed the utility rates, we knew that was going to have to, we knew staff was going to have to go along with that. There's just no other way about it. And so I would assume a good chunk of this would be funded out of utilities, right? Is that correct?
I think a good chunk of this will be funded within the projects. So when I've worked with Barbara, the idea is if you have the money for the project, include the staff time in that. If this is your workload, then you should have enough money for this staff there.
Mhm.
And then monitor, is that workload going to fluctuate, or can you predict it out? We have tremendous ability within the city. Almost everything we do, of those 41 projects, only 3 of them are in-house design. That if we ever have to tighten our belts here, that we can stop putting so much money to consultants and do work in-house.
Right. Well, it makes sense to me that we need more of what you just described, for multiple reasons. We have the basic utility stuff, sewer, water, storm, that has to be done, that work. Then we have some of the fun stuff that we put on the plate and improve and are excited to see. And, it just takes time to get it done because of our staffing levels here. So that's been a reality. And as I said, with the utility increase, we're going to have more projects that we need to get through. So we need to hire more people, unquestionably. And I still think we're still not, I don't even know if we're fully recovered from 2010 or 8 recession. We laid off, whatever it was, a lot of engineers then, or didn't replace them or whatever. Can't remember exactly, but we were down really thin in 2010, 11, and have come back very, very slowly in engineering. So, we made the big push in police and a lot of, 4 years ago, whatever, 4 years ago. But I just think that this is definitely need, unquestioned.
Mr. Mayor. Well, Hans, I I really appreciate this presentation because it's been very eye-opening on another issue. It's actually very much related to this, but I think that probably unsuspectedly so. And that is that, we've talked about annexation before. And, I grew up in the valley, but I ended up buying a home on the South Hill, about 128th in that area. And I sold that and I ended up buying my parents' house about 30 years ago. But I can tell you the South Hill, I would probably find a gold brick sooner than a sidewalk, okay, in my neighborhood up there. They're just very rare to find that kind of infrastructure. And as the county says we do rural, we don't do urban. I mean, that's what they say. They're intended for a rural. But if you go up there, they've created an urban environment within a rural, with kind of the rural tenets, no sidewalks, no curbs, these types of things. And I know the general rule is that for residential, for every dollar you take in, you spend about $1.15 in services. So it's the commercial where you end up, you take $1 and you spend 80 cents. They're more of they bring revenue, a net gain. And so when we talk about annexation on the council, be very cognizant of the fact that we will be taking areas, if we annex the, residential areas or maybe even commercial, wholly inadequate infrastructures. This conversation, I probably would square it as far as just whatever this is, we'll do a whole lot more up there. And the burden will be tremendous. We just have to take that into account. I'm not saying that it's not a possibility, but I think that is, you've been very enlightening.
Yeah, what I worry about the South Hill area is when you're taking an area that still is developing, you have the opportunity to get the infrastructure as it develops. You take an area that's already developed, it's hard to get the sidewalks put in by the businesses. It's like, no, we're not developing. You can't make us do it. It's a challenge, right? It's not like you're saying, it's not a showstopper, but go in eyes wide open. What will it cost?
I mean, I think we're lucky with the West Hills annexation, where my colleague lives here. A lot of that's going to be developed. There's a lot of open areas, and that'll be filled in through development primarily. And there's huge swaths of no parking, I mean, no sidewalks, but that will be filled as opposed to what you were saying, already developed areas. Very challenging.
Okay. I just wanted to say, Hans, this is, you started this about a couple of years ago where you're really telling us the hard truths. And I think sometimes it's easier for people to kind of gloss over sort of the hard truths because they know, chances of getting 8 staff members in the next few, but what I see here is a lot of sit back, analyze the situation. You've done so much work here, and this is super helpful when it goes to, say next year, when you may ask for one engineer or one senior. So it sets it up so that we already have the information and it's already sort of in our memory bank from a year ago, but I can see how much work you put into this, and it's super, super helpful for us to have this information and just be straight up truthful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a little shocking to me. I've been advocating for additional engineering staff for a while now, and I appreciate these numbers. The comparisons with the other cities is disheartening at some level. I just don't think we can continue to do it. So we've added one engineer in the utility department this year. I think we need to add more. If we're looking at council member initiatives, I want more. I just don't think we can sit on our hands in this. I work, I go to PCRC and look at the fighting battles about how money's awarded. And I guarantee you we'd be getting more funds if we had more shovel-ready projects where the engineering was done. And historically, I've sat in meetings where we look at our tier 3 funds and we say, okay, let's do this project, and this project, as opposed to saying, let's do the engineering for these 10 projects and then go out and get funding for them so that we can seed the projects with our money, but then pull in a lot of outside funding so that we're not spending all of our tier 3 on a project that could be financed by the county, state, or feds. So, again, I just look at our budget and I don't think we've got enough people in it. And Barbara, if I have my say, I'm going to make your job harder because you're going to have to balance it.
Well, I have a question, Steve and Barbara and Hans. That's a strategy. Is that a viable strategy? I mean, Councilmember Whitting kind of lays out the scenario that if you hired more people, had more shovel ready, which I understand, but is that a strategy? If so, what is our strategy?
Yeah, so there's a few things that I want to say. First of all, thank you, Hans, on this. So there's a few things really that in terms of, I guess we can talk strategy, what Deputy Mayor was talking about. First of all, the utility rate study and planning that for the next decade. So now we have that reliable funding source and plan for the next 10 years. That was important. So that sets the course for really the next 10 years. The other thing is that Barbara, Hans, others in the city are working on, as Hans mentioned, and Barbara did, I think last night, is working on a system that charges the projects to the utility funds and not the general fund. Now, there are projects, parks related, that's a general fund expense. There may be other items of utility projects that still a portion of it would need to be charged to the general fund. But how we're budgeting, how we're charging, and kind of flipping that to now we're really going to charge, this person is spending this much time to this utility fund. That changes the game too.
Mm-hmm.
That's another very important factor. Third is, and Hans alluded to this, is we have engineers, but you look at, say, Linwood, a comparable, a few other cities, they use project managers. You don't always need engineers for projects, right? We generally do not design our own projects, generally speaking. Some cities do. They design. They have engineers who design. We don't. So we need to get the right balance of, instead of just having all engineers, nothing against engineers, Hans, but instead of having all engineers, have project managers. Those tend to come at a little bit less expensive cost. So you have the right mix of project managers. You have the right mix of engineers. And I think also with council adding the grant coordinator, as Hans said, $18 million more in grants, that also is taking some pressure off the engineers, and adding this contract specialist will take some pressure off the engineers. So we are working on a plan to come back to you, and you can be assured we will be asking for more staffing in engineering. But it's not just going to be, we just want 4 more engineers, much like we did with the matrix study with the police department. There was a clear approach to how we want to do this, and that's what we want to develop here.
Okay.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
following up on that, Steve, I mean, the good news with that is it's paid for. A lot of that's already paid for with the utility rates. And so it's just a matter of getting that charge to those rates, right? So you hire more staff, whether it's project managers or engineers, hopefully the hit on the general fund is not too bad.
Yes. And that's exactly it, because that is where, as you all know, we are challenged right now is in the general fund. The utility funds are pretty healthy. It's the general fund that we are having challenges with. So making sure that we are, aligning that work to the utility funds, which are pretty healthy.
Going back to what Deputy Mayor mentioned regarding the staffing, it's a little disheartening. However, in my view, it's not surprising, to say the least. What I was wondering, and for those that are watching in the general public, just curious, if we were to increase staffing in these areas, could it or does it have any potential help with speeding up their permitting process for other projects, or is this out of that scope?
I truthfully think it's out of the scope. I mean,
Okay.
you're talking about two separate departments. We do an awful lot of coordination with development permitting services. Our mantra is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We try to apply the same rules to ourselves. It also makes us really make sure that the rule that we're putting in place is reasonable. And so that takes a little bit of coordination. The more that's done, where we're establishing this is what the rule is, this is what the policy is, or the standard, that does speed up the development process. You're not having to continually come up with exceptions to rules and things like that. So I think in a little way, but I think this is primarily our city project.
I just wanted to clarify that for those
Yeah.
watching.
What I do think, Deputy Mayor Whitting was getting at is there are projects like 9th Street going from 15th all the way up to 31st. We've had $200,000 in the budget now since 2022 to start the scoping on that project. You need to have some handle on what am I putting in there? Do I need right of way? How much right of way? Before you really apply and get a good application for a grant. And so having that work done up front to get us to the point that then now we know enough to be very competitive on these grants is very important. And it's also important that as you're applying for a grant, you better know what is scoring high and what's not scoring high on that grant. It's putting the right projects with the right elements in front so that you can compete with another jurisdiction that has done all these elements ahead of time and they're out competing you.
So Hans, I appreciate the presentation. I want to tell a deputy, or deputy mayor, whatever, outgoing person. I've got projects on here that are 10 years old. Just want to let you know that one. So, but I have been an advocate for engineering and grants. I like both. So I'm looking forward to what the city manager, what you guys come up with and what the strategy is here, because clearly we need to address the staffing issues, but I like that he's looking at various approaches and ways in which to do the same thing. Thanks.
I think somewhat you're seeing with the 41 active projects, another 15 waiting, somewhat that is a backlog that is trying to get through the system. My hope is that once we get enough to process what's coming in to going out, you won't have such a big backlog sitting there waiting to go through. And maybe the number of active projects can actually be a little bit less and we'll get better at timely delivery of the projects.
So Hans, I've got a question that when it comes to some advantages to speeding up these projects and getting them accomplished sooner than later through funding and through extra staff to help move it through. Is it possible? I know like when a few councils ago, it was kind of in place and then, there was some movement to do some major development, the downtown core with some public funding and things for the library. And of course, the pavilion and the Giorgio's restaurant facility and then City Hall, it stimulated some private money nearby to kind of connect the condos were built. In any of these projects, do you see that it might stimulate private development? If they started to see some of the stuff come in, it could stimulate private money to come in and tag on to that. So you'd have this public-private partnership of stimulus in certain areas that might say, hey, there's some cities investing in this infrastructure, sidewalks or whatever. They might find that values are incentivized are happening with private incentives just to be part of that.
It's absolutely true that the better our infrastructure is in place, the easier it is for someone to develop. You guys are well aware of our 4th Street replumbing project, trying to get so downtown can be a direct discharge area. That is a huge incentive for developers. Most of the developers will tell you that is a make or break on their projects if they have to deal with stormwater on site. So, accelerating that project and getting it to the places that want to develop is so critical. Will they contribute to pay for it? Well, we've been working hard to kind of get together what would be like a latecomers agreement. You just saw reading a couple meetings ago or last meeting to talk about like changes in our latecomers code that will allow this to happen. That's the foundational work. But if you can get that in place and have as the development occurs, they help contribute to the project, then we're working as more of a partnership with all this development.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I kind of see some value in that. That again, as the city invests in infrastructure and these kinds of things are important, that private development might want to be tag on to that and be part of. And it was I think I may have mentioned this earlier, just as kind of a lousy analogy, but nevertheless an analogy. In the private sector, when Nordstrom went to go put in a location in downtown Vancouver, Canada, I was talking to a commercial real estate agent. As soon as they announced that publicly, everything in the area went up in value. Now, it's a terrible analogy, but I think the analogy, though, makes a picture as we invest in infrastructure and different private monies realize, oh, wait a minute, I can tag on to that. They're going to be attracted to that to realize that's there. And therefore, we provide economic stimulus and raise the values of properties. Even properties begin to become more valuable in some of these areas. You put sidewalks down a street, those houses go up because they have some curb appeal. And so it just stimulates a lot of good things besides the practicalness of being able to use and function with infrastructure, sidewalks, sewer, and stormwater. So
one of the things that you'll see me trying to come back to you probably next year, early next year, is incentives for plats to extend the sewer line out to their plat.
yeah,
There, by incentivizing that with maybe credits through their system development charges, and then allowing the latecomers to be in place there. When a sewer line goes into someplace like the West Hills, you see it like on 13th Street Southwest. All these plats went in after the sewer line. So as you start to incentivize developers extending the sewer lines, doing it, their construction, they're doing that, then it's making an incentive for all the other properties to start doing that development and tie into those sewers.
Wonderful. That's great. Council, any follow-up thoughts on this? Any questions? We know we have some good discussions.
Just want to mention he's gone 7 minutes.
Oh, that's okay.
I finished my presentation.
I think we owe some of the blame. We were firing him with questions. We were all chomping at the bit to ask him questions. So
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add, Councilmember Whitting complimented you. I too have heard from a number of constituents, your bedside manner, so to speak, has been exemplary. So I just want to pass that on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very
people
much
notice. People notice. And what I'm hearing, and again, I just want to, as long as we're on that subject, the council many years ago, set the tone on a standard of customer service. Steve caught that, began to, connect that to his directors, and the directors are connecting that with staff. But I still think there's a ways to go to make sure that penetrates all the way down. So I mean, we can get it as a council. We can get it as executive staff, making sure that the folks working with the people really get that. And so that we were depending upon directors and city manager to make sure that kind of penetrates down through, so where people are really sensing it, where the rubber meets the road and touching people. So, but in terms of this, I 100% agree. It's fantastic. Well, great.
Have a couple before we close up. Before we close up, I've got a couple of things that I have been on my mind, and it's biennium budget season, but I'm looking ahead a little bit, and if with the council's permission, I'd like to just talk briefly about a couple of things that have been on my mind.
Council, I'm open. If there's any concern, it's not on the agenda.
It's budget oriented, just wrong year.
All right, yeah, go for it. Yeah, I'm game.
The first is, we've got a couple of things going on that we're betwixt and between on, and obviously we don't know how the bond measure is going to play out. I'm assuming it's going to pass, but following behind that, we've got the need to do something about the court, and we've got some funds in our hip pocket a little bit, our tier 3 and some other areas. And I just think we need to be thinking ahead about those that court decision, and it's probably going to be a couple of years out, but I'm thinking about it, and I hope all of you are thinking about it too. So that's first item on my agenda. The other is the hotel model. You know, we've had this hotel program going on for a number of years now. The first it was county money and Department of Commerce money, and more recently it's been ARPA money. But that ARPA money runs out 12 months from, 14 months from now, and I don't want to have us be in a position where we drive right up to the edge and then fall off the cliff. I think we need to be planning ahead for that. I've talked to the city manager about it. He's assured me that we're going to be addressing that in the early in the new year. But I don't think our general fund can support that kind of a program going forward. So we're going to have to adapt and figure out what we're going to do and what it's going to look like and how we're going to. We dealt with the Meridian Heights manufactured home park this year, and with people losing their housing, and when the hotel model goes away in 14 months, then we're going to have a similar situation. And I want to be very intentional and proactive about that. So that's on my mind, and I wanted to don't get the chance to talk to everybody in a group that often. So I wanted to bring up those couple of things.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, council, for latitude to do that. I almost think, as we look at future study sessions, first of all, I don't think, many of you know, I don't think we have enough of them. I think we have, maybe 4 or 5 a year if we're lucky. It seems like, I'm just guessing, but it seems like study sessions should be a little bit less formal. That's why you see I just kind of let people kind of chime in. We should be kind of a collaborative effort rather than a formal council meeting. And I do think that if we're on a subject, and again, I think, whoever the mayor at the time, can kind of interject if it gets out of too wide of corral. But I do think that we ought to have some opportunity to discuss, because we don't get a chance to meet together, and we're in a public setting. And so I think having appropriate context or subjects that come up in a study session should be considered in the future, should we have more study sessions or whatever. But yeah. Council, anything else that we want to bring up that's budget related we want to chat about? I'm happy to open it up before we go into citizens' comments.
I had one thing. First of all, I'll echo the deputy mayor's comments. I hope that it passes the bond, of course, and move forward on figuring out how to do the court. So good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the same with the hotel thing. So I wanted to just briefly go back on the LTAC Main Street thing again. Just had some more follow-up conversations. I just want to reiterate that through that Main Street actually has a $50,000 increased cost in meeker days this year. And so
It's a one-time cost.
it's combination. So there's rental offenses and stuff they used to get from the fair, and there's also some one-time costs. So in reality, their increase really wasn't, they had an increase ultimately, but since the balance, the LTAC funds, it all came out of Main Street in the LTAC process. And where they ended up is kind of even Steven, and everybody else on the list got a pretty good bump, but when you factor in the increase in cost, they really didn't get that. So I think there's a little bit of bitterness out there, and I don't think we really want that. And so I think we all want Maker Days to be fully, we don't want them to cut corners. We want them to have a great Maker Days. And so I think it's not much money. It's $13,750. We could go back to the LTAC to divvy that up differently, or B, we could just add that amount of money of general fund as a line item out of general fund to Maker Days to augment, like a one-time unexpected costs that they have to cover. So I would advocate for one of those two things for us. See what you guys
Well,
think.
I wouldn't send it back to the LTAC. I mean, they made it pretty clear. The only one that objected was the executive director of the Main Street. Everyone else was all on board. So I don't think it'll get a different result. And I would say that the Meeker Day is going at 50,000. I think they still ended up getting 55,000. So they're not at a loss. And we're talking about tough times. I mean, and they asked a significant amount more than they did the year before. So it's still a plus.
Yeah,
increase
they
it.
asked for that amount, I guess, because they needed it, but
Yeah.
everybody else got pretty signitigant.
Yeah, I don't,
increases.
we don't know if their costs went up. I don't know. We haven't dug into the weeds on that. So we don't know if it's apples with apples, but end of the day, I still think that they didn't lose like they did the year before where they had to take
Yeah.
a cut, right?
If we
And
don't want to send it to LTAC, I would encourage to just do an add-on for out of general fund.
Just to weigh in, one thing in looking at the schedule from last night, one of the things that wasn't there that I realized might have been is we charged them with doing a multicultural festival, which adds to their cost. And I didn't see it a line item for it, but I don't know how much that's always being
B&O tax. And then Barbara didn't I mean, we don't need to get a formal, but if I'm correct, I think the city contributed outside of the LTAC, a B&O tax credit of close to $100,000 of an infusion. In the first year, they don't say have to put on that cultural concert. So there's some, I know, but the first year, they're not required to do it with the infusion of $100,000. So there's no output going on in the first year. That could be some extra funding there that could be in prep. So I do think there's some factor there, funds that could be utilized. So
I think at the end of the day, they'll probably be fine. I just think through the process for our image as a council, I would just recommend that we come up with $13,000. That's just my thought. I think they would appreciate that.
I'd support it.
well, that'd be something that we could bring up at a council meeting, I guess, if that's what it kind of, because we still have to bring this before council for consideration and approval. That would be the time to bring that up.
First reading will be November.
That,
14th.
yeah, so that would be the time to bring
I
that
mean,
up.
we could do that now, and it's basically a council initiated item.
Yeah.
You can.
I would just
What's
put
that?
that forward on the table.
That would be awesome.
The only thing I would really like to see is it's just a breakdown of what's different, because you're talking numbers and it's not my strength, but just if I could see it. If we could do something like that, that would be good. So I know I'm looking at you, he does the work, so.
I just talk.
We just talk. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else before we close up the evening for citizens' comments?
Do we need to take action to cancel tomorrow, or is it just?
I was going to bring that up.
At the end, but thank you.
Is there a fourth support on, I mean, we're gonna kind of do what you say and kind of put that together as add that to the budget item. Is there 4 here that would?
Well, could this come up? This could come up at the first reading, right?
It can come up. But I'm
It's
just
a
trying
study session. Tonight's a studying, so we're
You don't
discussing
have to
it.
decide tonight, but I
Yeah.
just want
For
to make.
first reading, if there is 4 that support that, then it would be nice for us to know, so we
Right.
can bring
So
that
they
at
can
first
be
reading,
prepared
but
for
it's
it.
not required. So you're
Yeah.
both.
Well, why don't you just have it in the wings? You've articulated at least 3 people that maybe have interest. We can at least have it in a backup plan, right? And then bring it up at the night of and discuss it.
Support them, he doesn't have to do the work.
I think there's a support. I'll weigh in as a fourth.
I just hate for him to do all this work to have it in the wings and go, yeah, you don't think so. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the meeting,
Okay. Yeah, so there's a study session scheduled for tomorrow night. I think it can be canceled unless you all want to come back for a third night.
Cancel.
I
Okay.
think Jill wants to come back.
That was it. Thank you. I think there's
Okay.
this.
All right, so I'll turn it over to citizens' comments. If there are folks who would like to speak, this would be a time to speak. You can only speak on the item on the agenda, which would be, if you want to talk about utilities, capital improvement plan, you're certainly welcome. We'll open that up. And then, Ahmed, is there anybody on the digital who'd like to speak? Okay. Anything open? Good. Okay. No citizens' comments at this time. We'll adjourn. It is now 7:48. God bless you.
Bravo.
It should be